Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Healthy Living Live. I'm Chef AJ, and today we are going to be talking to Dr. Frank Sabatino, who is the medical director of the Balance for Life Health Retreat in Deerfield Beach, California. Welcome, Dr. Sabatino.
Deerfield Beach, Florida. Deerfield Beach, Florida.
Did I say Deerfield Beach?
You're such a Californian. You see how you are? Okay, that's fine. That's okay. I'll go to California too. It's okay.
Oh my gosh, I said California. I didn't even know there was a Deerfield Beach, California. That is hilarious. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Well, tell us a little bit about Deerfield Beach, Florida, where the retreat actually is and what you do there, Dr. Frank.
Yeah, we have a live-in residential center that is grounded in, SOS, plant-based nutrition. Of course, that's the fundamental eating plan of this place, but it's a place where people can go for an extended period of time. We're right on the ocean in a beautiful part of Florida on the East Coast. And not only do we have that plant exclusive program, but, we have a fitness program that goes on from morning until evening, starting with walks and, general fitness, pool classes, low impact. We deal with stress management stuff in terms of yoga and Tai Chi, which we do on a regular basis. I lecture every single day for an hour, and we cover every aspect of health and wellness. And we're also one of just a few places in the world that does therapeutic water-only fasting for people with more serious health issues. So we have everything from the eating plan to detox programs that include organic juices to water-only fasting. But, many people come just for the lifestyle change, a healthy vacation, get exposed to the eating plan that we're recommending. And it's a phenomenal place to come and restore, reboot, just regenerate. It's a lovely, lovely place right on the ocean.
Well, what eating plan do you recommend? And do you recommend this for everyone or just people that are trying to lose weight?
Would recommend what now?
Well, you said that people don't necessarily have to do a water fast. But
I recommend the eating plan for everybody on the planet. I mean, I really think it's the most ideal approach for promoting health and, of course, regulating weight the way we want it to be. And that's a very important piece because, as you know, when we incorporate this way of eating and living, it builds in the calorie density components that allow people to eat large volumes and quantities of really beautiful, low calorie dense foods, still regulate their weight, feel very satisfied, and that's a very big piece. And because we go non-SOS without salt, oil, and sugar, it also breaks cravings and food addictions and things of that nature. So I recommend the program for everyone, but we have people with very specific health issues that sometimes need another step. And that's where we would, recommend something like a fast or a more pointed detoxification program. And then we can do that. I've done Supervise close to 10,000 fasts over 40 years. This is basically the fourth or fifth place of this kind that I'm in, where I take an in-residence place. It's a little bit different in that we're in the Wyndham Hotel, so we have this beautiful hotel setting. But because the hotel gave us private spaces for our people, we keep a very intimate program. And we typically keep it somewhere between, 5 and 15 people a week so that I can interact very personally with each person. So it's a very personalized, beautiful health retreat.
How many fasts did you say that you supervised?
Probably close to 10,000 over 40 years.
That's incredible.
Everything from, simple inflammation, joint pain to forms of cancer, cysts, growths, all of it. And what's very important for people to know is that, we have this idea that when you live in a healthier way in this plant exclusive manner, that you can prevent a lot of diseases. And we know that that is in fact true. But what's even more important is that you can reverse most of the major issues and that people suffer with, whether it's high blood pressure, weight issues, diabetes, whatever. So we see that reversal every single day. And that's very important because the typical way that disease care is done in our country, there's one thing you can safely say if you go to typical medical care, and that's that you're not going to get well. I mean, think about this. If you go and you have high blood pressure and your doctor puts you on a high blood pressure medication, you say, "Doc, how long am I going to be on this medication?" What's the typical answer? Forever, for life, because they know you're not going to get well. So when we take this healthcare approach, it's truly a healthcare model where we see disease being generated by the consequences of choices that we're making. And for the most part, it is all about the food. That is such a huge piece for generating problems of heart disease, diabetes, cancer, stroke, obesity. So this is a remarkable program to help people get their weight and health in order.
Wow, it must be very rewarding to see patients actually get well.
Yeah, it's a remarkable thing. And in fact, you're seeing a lot more medical doctors now going in this direction because they've dealt with the frustration of not seeing people get well. And when they start doing plant-based counseling or lifestyle medicine, for the first time, they see really remarkable recoveries. And it's a beautiful thing. That's why we went into doing this work. We wanted to help people get well.
How did you get interested in doing this?
Well, it's interesting. I grew up in an Italian household in the Bronx many years ago. And growing up in an Italian household, we ate what was typical of that. And I was a child of the 50s, so in those days you lived by the 4 basic food groups, 2 of which were meat and dairy, if you recall. All of those 4 food group charts hung in all the cafeterias in all the public schools in America in those days. So I ate a lot of meat, dairy. I had a lot of problems with colitis as a child, a lot of bowel related issues. And of course, it's intriguing that back then, if you think it's the dark ages now, it was pretty dark then, because I always found it interesting how people that are gastroenterologists or gastro docs, to a great extent, don't see the connection between what we eat and what happens in the bowel, which I always find kind of remarkable. So I was put through a lot of medical doctors. Nobody ever talked about diet. No one ever mentioned anything. So I had all of this stuff going on. And then when I was going into college, I met a man who was the father of a good friend of mine. And he was an insurance salesman in the Bronx, but he had collected in kind of an anti-medical library with all of these alternative thinkers, nutrition, and all of that. So I started to read my way through his library. And I started to go into this plant-based direction. I was like 18, 19. And for the first time, all of those bowel issues disappeared and became a thing of the past. So I thought it was pretty interesting that after 15 years of medical mismanagement, it took an insurance salesman from the Bronx to solve the problem. And so, so that piqued my interest. And then I went on and I decided that medicine would not be my path. Chiropractic would be a better path for me. And then in going through chiropractic college, I met a lot of the thinkers who were running fasting institutions and so on. I got out, I wanted to do more research. So being a glutton for punishment, I went back to medical school. And I completed medical school and got a PhD in neuroscience, cell biology. And I did some of the original research on calorie restriction and aging, a lot of what now people do with intermittent fasting. I was involved in the early research of all of that. So it's been an interesting journey. And then I ended up at a health center in South Florida called the Regency back from 1989. And I wound up being there for 25 years doing this work. And we saw 3,000-4,000 people a year for 25 years.
Well, you are the best kept secret in the plant-based movement. I didn't have the privilege of meeting you until March. I've been to Balance for Life twice now. I liked it so much that I plan to have my 60th birthday there next year, but it is a remarkable place of healing, and the food is beautiful and the location is beautiful. How were you not on our radar all these years? Have you just been
I was doing the work. I'll tell you what's interesting. A lot of your viewers know people like Dr. Alan Goldhammer, and they know Dr. Joel Furman. They know these people in the field. I was doing lectures and they were coming to seminars where they were in school. They were still students when I met them. And so now they're luminaries in the work that they do. But it's so interesting because we know each other close to 40 years, all of those docs. So we're in a kind of a tight circle, and it's just the way it is. There are many people who know me and many who didn't. That's just the way it went down,
Well, we hope many more people will
we're in the trenches doing the work, that's for sure.
We hope many more people will watch this broadcast and know you. And if you're watching it live, please consider sharing it, because we want more people to know about Dr. Frank and the Balance for Life Center. So this SOS diet or SOS-free diet, isn't it a little extreme? I mean, do you really eat that way? Is it really necessary if we don't have health problems, if we're not overweight? I mean, why go to all the trouble?
Well, it's kind of intriguing that when you look at the fast food industries, they learned a long time ago that by putting extra salt and oil and sugar in these refined products, it would trigger a certain amount of craving and attachment to these foods, because they stimulated what we call the brain reward cascade, which some people have referred to as the pleasure trap in the human brain. And what happens is these substances trigger responses that we associate with a certain degree of pleasure. And so the bottom line is, when you have those foods that have become a part of you over a long period of time, you do have a lot of problems, not only regulating weight and health, but you have a lot of problems with having craving and addiction to those products. So we find that by taking away the salts and the cooked oils, which also tend to be very inflammatory, creating a lot of irritation and inflammation in the body, it's amazing how quickly food addictions, food cravings will change, and people are in a more balanced place to really appreciate the taste of good food and good quality plant-based foods. Salt is a classic example. The more you use it, the more your taste become blunted. So you lose the ability to taste effectively, so you need that much more stimulation before you can taste anything. How many people do you know, and our viewers know, that before they even taste their food, they got a salt shaker going? My father was like that. And the dialogue always was, oh, the food is tasteless. And I said, Dad, the food's not tasteless. You are. Because you can't taste anything till it exceeds this incredible level of stimulation. One of the beautiful things we see with fasting, and it's a classic example, your taste becomes so sensitized when you fast that when you break a fast, you can have a piece of romaine lettuce, plain romaine lettuce, and people will eat this lettuce and they'll wax philosophical for, oh, this lettuce. And they're tasting things that they didn't even know that they could taste. So these foods are constantly blunting our ability to be sensitive to the beautiful taste of natural foods. They're triggering addictions and cravings. They're triggering inflammation and weight gain. So we find that by stepping back from that, and the truth is, there's different ways to cook and saute. You don't need that. You can use vegetable broth and balsamic vinegars, and as a chef, there's so many ways with herbs and spices to create remarkable flavors in foods without having to salt everything to death. And so, it's a little bit of a strange and foreign step at first, but once you do it, it's amazing how clear and how clean and how open you become to all the plant-based foods. So much better.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I haven't eaten salt since 2008, at least not on purpose. And right. It just seems to be people, a lot of people that are whole food plant-based, they'll get a hold of Forced Over Knives or read Dr. Esselstyn's book, and they'll get the no oil thing from Dr. McDougall. Right. And maybe they'll understand sugar is not bad, but they can't understand if salt has no calories, what's the big deal? But what you say is so true.
Yeah. And it's a major inflammatory agent. Like if we have people with rheumatoid arthritis or any kind of inflammation like that, even marginal amounts of salt will bring on that pain. It's remarkable to see that. And you see it really after periods of detoxification, like juicing, fasting, things of that nature. So
yeah, I think you're right. The reason it's so hard for people to even decrease the salt, let alone omit it entirely, is that for a period of time, it's just the food will not taste good to them unless they've done a water fast.
Or unless they've committed to eating that way for some period of time, or they've given themselves a chance to get sensitive again. But you're right, absolutely.
Yeah, and then once you're off salt, like you say, like char.
You can't go back. Well, even a little bit, you're like, oh, what is,
Yeah, exactly.
It's overwhelming. It really is overwhelming. It's amazing.
It's so interesting how taste can change. I remember, I work at True North occasionally as a guest chef and speaker, and I've seen people come off water fast and eat steamed zucchini, and it's like they're having an orgasm. It's like it's like watching somebody eat, hot fudge sundae. So one of our live viewers, GC, has a question. Do you recommend distilled water while doing a supervised fast? And is it safe to drink distilled water on a regular basis?
Yeah, water is supposed to just be H2O. It doesn't need to have mineral content. So we look at neutral to slightly alkaline water, meaning neutral will be a pH of about 7. Most tap waters are acidic, so we don't like them as much because the body tends to be alkaline. But in all the years of fasting people, we've been using either distilled or reverse osmosis water to treat hundreds of thousands of fasting patients, and it's fine. We have a heyday now of these super alkaline waters, and there's really no reason. If you think about rainwater or natural water in nature, it tends to be basically neutral pH. So distilled or just plain water that's slightly to the slight alkaline side of 7. If you were to take tap water or bottled water and just go to your local Walgreens and just buy a little pH paper, you can stick it right in your water, and it needs to be basically neutral or slightly alkaline. If you do that, you're fine. I just don't like acidic water, and we try not to do that during fast or at any time.
Yeah. I see some of these people that buy this very expensive designer water, yet they still continue to eat a horrible diet as if the water.
Remember this, minerals in our diet are translated from the soil by plants. We don't go and eat dirt. That would be like getting minerals in water by itself. We want minerals coming in the organic structure that they come in with whole food. So we want water just to be water. We want minerals to come in whole foods. And there's always been this notion that if you drink regular water, it's going to leach minerals out of the body. We just don't see that. You just need to drink the cleanest water you can get, a clean water source. And if you can get a distiller in your kitchen, or if you want to get a reverse osmosis water or a filter system in your house, you can do that. But the bottom line is we want just basically neutral pH water.
Great. I was a guest on a summit earlier today. It was geared towards mothers with children. And one of the big things is parents, mothers especially, say it's just really hard to get their kids to eat healthfully. You have a lot of kids and you fed them pretty well, didn't you?
Well, I raised 5 children, and we raised them pretty much on this lifestyle. Though early on, my ex-wife grew up in a family of Seventh-day Adventists. Now, she didn't practice that religious belief system, but because of that, the only women she ever really knew her whole life were like 60 and 70-year vegetarians. Because the Seventh-day Adventists, while they'll eat dairy and some sugar, they were pretty much the original sect from Ellen White was actually very, very pristine. They didn't even use dairy or any of that early on. So, what was interesting is she had a lot of recipes from these old Adventist women of all these plant-based casseroles. So for all the holiday dinners, we had all just these plant-based incredible casseroles. And so, yeah, they were brought up with that mentality. And here's the interesting piece. Aside from an emergency procedure or two, understand that these were 5. I married her. She had 3 children, and then we made 2 children together. These were 5 children all through their entire childhood, never had a pediatrician visit, never had an antibiotic. Now, they went to public school, so they were exposed to all the same viruses and bacteria. And so the bottom line is this way of living is powerful for children. And right now, it's so easy to make dishes that include beans and grains and potatoes and veggies. And there's so many inventive and creative recipes if you want to get fancy. There's so many simple ways to do this if you want to get simple. It's so relatively inexpensive to do. Sometimes people complain, oh, it's so expensive to eat healthy. That's really not true at all. I mean, if you buy you make beans, there's something like $50 to $1 a pound. I mean, really, when you look at the cost of these things. So the bottom line is what I find with children and what we did early on, and this is where there was a little modification. Nobody loves deprivation. No one. If I tell you not to do something and you're not living this way, there's a part of your brain that just can't wait to do it and can't wait to do it in my face. That's just human nature. So if the kids, when they were younger, when they were small, wanted a pizza, they got a pizza, but we would use maybe some almond cheese or soy cheese with all the veg. So they never felt deprived. No one wants to feel deprived. So there is a place in the panorama of things, especially with children, where some of these analog foods may have value. You may use an almond milk, or you may use a soy milk in a granola or a cereal. So what I'm saying is with families, you make some of these little adjustments and you keep moving toward this idea of getting rid of a lot of the salt, oil, and sugar. And the kids, just like adults, their taste will accommodate to that. And they'll look forward to those foods and give them a lot of fresh fruit instead of candies and sweets. Sugar is the sweet, fruit is the sweet with children. It's an amazing thing because we're naturally fruit eaters, if you think about it. Nobody picks a mango from a tree and thinks about how they're going to saute it or fry it. I mean, in its basic state, it is most natural for primates like us. So we always had a lot of fresh fruit, a lot of fresh greens and veggies and some analog foods. And that's how we made it work. And it worked beautifully. They took lunches to school. They had dinner. And again, their lunches were so interesting that a lot of their friends wanted their lunches rather than them wanting something else. So it's kind of interesting. So parents just need to toe the line, create a lot of options. But it's funny too with parenting, because in the modern day, we're at a time where kids hold parents hostage a lot. So like we had 5 kids, so we put out a beautiful dinner of all kinds of things. And of course, with 5 people, someone's going to invariably do, I don't really. Well, I wasn't going to go down in the car and run to the store. I said, that's fine. I'll see you at breakfast.
Ah,
So dinner started to look a little more attractive, and they tried it. The bottom line is, we as parents need to expose them to the best that we can do and give them an opportunity to develop the sensitivity and taste for those foods. And so, my kids through their whole childhood never had a drop of regular milk. They were nursed a long time, every one of them. And then they went right into, plant-based milks and plant-based foods. And that's the way it was.
that is incredible. We have a comment from Sherry here who's saying that she cannot get her 4-year-old grandson to touch a vegetable no matter what she does. His diet at home and his other grandmas is horrid.
Yeah, because his parents and his other grandparents are giving him all this other stuff. That's the problem. So
Yeah.
just like an adult with bad habits, he's got to break those habits somehow. With him, I would try to work through the fruit end a little bit, or make some kind of funky foods where she can sneak in a little bit of veggies and some of the things that he does like, where, you're kind of blending and mixing and matching. And it's going to be a little bit of a dance, because it's already been 4 years where he's been developing habits with some of these fast foods and junk foods. And so he's got some of those cravings himself with dairy and sugar and salt. So it's going to take a little bit of time, but I would work with fresh fruit, try to get him to do that. Kids will do that. Make them some homemade ice creams with frozen fruit and things, things of that nature. Make some funky smoothies that have greens in them and other fruits. So there's ways that you can play around and just try to get a little bit funky and see if you can get that in that way. And it does help. But the problem is she's battling the fact that day in and day out with his parents and with the other grandparents, they're giving him all of that junk when he wants it. So it's an uphill battle. It's not easy. Yeah. I get that.
As much as you and I love whole natural food, for people that are addicted to junk food, it just can't compete.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, their tastes are a certain way. Until it changes, that's what's attractive to you.
It's amazing when you see kids that have been raised the way your kids were, or like Dr. Goldhammer's son, Gar. They don't have cravings. They don't have acne. They don't have weight problems. They virtually never see a doctor, unless they fall down and break their arm or something. It's just incredible what's possible if parents would just get on board. Growing up.
Think about it, I had a family of 5 children. Their whole childhood, our medical bill was $0. Wow. I mean, when you think about that, it's so mind-blowing, because in America, generally speaking, by the time a child is 18, they've been through 10 to 20 rounds of antibiotics, typically in America. And I mean, it's bizarre. It's ridiculous.
That's unbelievable. We have a very nice comment from Susan who says, "Hey, Dr. Sabatino, you turned me vegan in 2007 after my 2-week visit to your former spa, the Regency in Hallandale, Florida. Love you." So that's terrific.
Turning sounds like I was a vampire that turned him. That's the dialogue when you turn somebody. You turn them into. So anyway, I'm glad I turned you into the V world. Yes, the V world, the vegan world. That's very kind. Thank you.
That's incredible. One of the things, you were always on my radar. I mean, I knew your name, for years. I heard you mention. I didn't know what you looked like. I didn't know really where you were. It was one of those things. Yeah, I guess someday we'll get together or whatever. But then I believe might have been last December even, that I was on a plane coming home from True North, reading a magazine, and you had written an article on food addiction. And I'm like, this guy gets it. This guy totally gets it. Talk about it. I mean, do you think it's real? Is it a problem? Because so many, this is what I deal with in my daily life, working with people that I believe suffer from food addiction, which is, of course, refined food addiction. They're not addicted to mango and kale. But how often do you see this in your practice, and how long have you known about this?
I think it's all over the place. I think it's so much more than people think that it is. And here's the reason why. I mean, we have an inborn ability in our body and our brain for the release of a set of transmitters that are lumped under the heading of what's called the brain reward cascade, meaning that we have the ability to experience pleasure from the simple acts and joys of life, whether it's a hug of a maid, a tasty food, a sexual experience. So we have that ability. And the bottom line is the neurotransmitter that's the common denominator of that pleasure is something called dopamine. So dopamine is kind of the pinnacle of this cascade. And so whether you eat something sweet or whether you have a sexual experience, down the line, that dopamine is released, and it's also released in your memory centers of the brain. So you will remember that pleasurable experience. Here's the problem. Sometimes that because of a lot of eating of a lot of junk food, or not sleeping well, or having stress, or, doing things that are abnormal lifestyle patterns, you can distort that chemistry of the reward cascade, and you get to a place where you no longer feel pleasure from the simple acts of life. And you have something in the field of addiction that is called the reward deficiency syndrome. That means the person can't experience that routine reward from the simple things of life. But when you can't experience pleasure, you start becoming irritable. You start having feelings of anxiety, depression, even isolation, loneliness, and no brain wants to feel that. So the body's going to do whatever behavior or substance it can do to jazz up that brain reward. And that usually leads to the 5 major forms of addiction. And that, of course, is food, drugs and alcohol, sex, risk-taking, which used to be called gambling, and then what we call process addictions like shopping and internet and all of that. The problem is with food addiction, it's a little bit different than everything else because you don't really have to shoot heroin, but you got to eat 2 to 3 times a day. So if you've got an issue, and now the question, a good question is, why would someone choose one of those addictions over another? And I feel that has a lot to do with our environment and how we even grow up. I mean, I grew up in an ethnic household. So from the first breath you took, you learned how to create comfort and well-being and distraction. The difference with food addiction is that, you know, you have to eat 3 times a day. And the bottom line is that means not only is it important what you're eating, but you have to understand sometimes the context of why and when you're eating. What are you using food for? Because so many people that are trying to solve problems, even on an emotional level, because of that reward deficiency, are doing and using food to create some degree of comfort in that sense of isolation and anxiety and depression. So if you're doing that, it's very hard to create a normal relationship with food. And so on some level, you've got to address that piece in addition to eating healthier foods. Now, the nice thing is, if you get rid of the addictive substances in the foods that we're recommending, like salt and oil, dairy products, which can have an opiate-like addictive quality, you allow that brain and body, that whole chemistry to kind of calm down a little bit. But that's where you still have to be mindful. You have to have some sense of what does that food mean to you? What are you using it for? And there may be a little personal work that has to go on to unravel what's driving your addictive food use. And so that's why I believe that really when you look at people with weight issues, I think that's a much bigger piece than we give it credit for. I think there's a lot of use of food in a way to create comfort, to create distraction, to deal with emotional issues in our lives when we need to find other tools that help us do that so we can get back to a normal relationship with food. Let's face it, what food becomes a friend in the night. It doesn't talk back. It's always there. It's just like you sit down with your tub of ice cream and you can just kind of go mindless. And the bottom line is you don't get any closer to personal truth. And it's hard to create a normal relationship with food unless you address those issues to some degree.
Do you help people do that at Balance for Life?
I do. We do mindful practices. I do a lot of communication and talking. And frankly, if I think they need someone better than me at doing that, I'll hook them up with someone that can help them process that even a little bit better. And that's why in food addiction programs, you've got 12-step type programs where people go into a community and they talk out some of this stuff. There's a real reason why having that kind of communication can be very valuable, whether it's one-on-one with someone or even with close personal friends or people you trust. But you got to get at the heart of sometimes what you're using food for, not only what it is that you're eating.
Right. So not just what you're eating, but maybe what's eating you as well. Huh?
Yeah, that's a very big piece. I mean,
right.
Think about it. Logically, everyone knows if you don't eat crap, you're going to feel better. The question is, we keep making that choice. Why? And because there's addictive quality in food and there's addictive quality in our brain trying to find peace and serenity and comfort and things that we're not getting in our relationships or the way we interact in our lives and in our world. That becomes important to some degree. It really does.
Well, something like 90% of all diets fail. Do you think it's because they're missing that piece of food addiction and they're just telling people to moderate the use of unhealthy foods?
Not even that. It's even worse. They've come from a place of restriction. They tell them, don't eat this. It's all about, deprivation. No brain wants to feel deprived. So if you create a model of a diet that's a deprivational model Of course, someone may be able to do that for a few minutes, lose a few pounds, but what's going to happen? They're going to go right back to the old ways. So that's one of the beauties of this way of living, that what we're trying to teach people, because you can eat volumes of food. You have this feeling of satisfaction while having very low calorie density. So it's really affecting us in such a positive way, but you don't walk around feeling empty and deprived. You feel satisfied. And so that's a very important piece in terms of eating this way. And then it will allow you to maybe stay on track to do other personal work. You understand what I'm saying? Because this is a big thing, even in the field of addiction. When people go into addiction programs, those programs are not treatment programs per se. If you go 30 days to some place with food addiction, that's just stabilizing your food use. You have to do the work of dealing with what's driving all of that. And so by eating the way we're recommending and doing a little bit of, conscious personal work cognitively, you can come to an incredible place of balance with food use and over time be remarkably healthy. Because think about this. I would say that food addiction and the abnormal use of food that way is tied directly into the most major pathologies we have, like diabetes and heart disease and so on. So you could make the case that addiction is the number one killer, not heart disease and diabetes and stroke. You can make the case that food addiction and addiction in general may be the most significant health problem that we suffer with as a culture.
Yeah, I agree. I love how you said no brain wants to be hungry. And that's why I see so many people on these strict weighing and measuring calorie counting programs have success initially, and then they end up gaining more weight back because you can't go hungry very long.
AJ, dieting is a $70 billion industry with a 95% failure rate. There is nothing else on this planet that would tolerate that level of failure and inefficiency for the money that people are investing and becoming hopeless in the process. It's ungodly. The truth is, there's so much hope in this whole idea of regulating weight if you approach it from the standpoint of eating those things that will give you satisfaction, that give you that opportunity to feel satisfied while you get on with your life and get on with it.
Mm-hmm. Janine commented, some people confuse deprivation with eliminating junk. And so many people say that, but if I give up oil or salt or alcohol, I'm going to feel deprived and then I'm going to want it even more.
Right. Yeah. And she's right. I mean, it's about really working on understanding that we want to eat foods that eliminate the sense of deprivation. And that's where the calorie dense foods that we recommend come into play. Because you walk around, you're not in that place. When you sit down and eat, if someone passes by and you're eating a salad, I've seen this. People will stop. They can't get over the size of they can't believe that you can look the way that you do and eat the salad the size of the bowl that you're eating, because it blows their mind. They were told from the get-go that, you got to have this much food on a plate, because if you don't, you can't. And it's a ridiculous model that has absolutely driven people insane. And not only that, it's encouraged so much failure in people's lives and so much hopelessness. And I'm here to tell you that it's incredibly hopeful and it's incredibly straightforward to be more successful. Do you have to make an application? Do you have to be consistent? You do, but it gets easier over time.
That's terrific. And what you say about calorie density is so true. It's like Dr. Steve Lewenda calls it the magical buffet. It's like every day is Christmas because you get to eat so much delicious food and you don't feel deprived.
Hey, I grew up in an Italian household. I love to eat. I'm never going to stop eating. So when I found this way that I could eat volumes of food and maintain health and leanness, I was like, it was amazing. It was a revelation. I mean, it's a revelation. It's an epiphany.
It's the best. Amanda wants to know, how long does it take to adapt to a salt-free diet so you can taste the natural flavors and enjoy your food?
We see it really within a few days to a week. I got to be honest, it doesn't take long. Now, for it to be really etched over time, it may take longer. But for example, you even fast 3 or 4 days and that'll happen. But I see people that even come to our program. So after the first 3 or 4 days, when at first it was kind of like, wow, I got to get used to this. It's a little bit bland. But then we're using things, with garlic and oregano and basil and all these lovely tastes. So really within even a week or two, so much change already occurs with sensitivity. I mean, it's remarkable. It doesn't take long. It just takes being consistent. So what I'm saying is you can't do SOS for one day eat the way you were eating the next 2 days, go back to SO. You've got to give it a period of, a week or two to really let that change take place. But it takes place pretty quickly.
You talk about the change that takes place in neuroadaptation, whether it's in the brain or the taste buds or both, but then people go back to the same environment that often made them fat and sick. You know what I mean?
That's part of the addiction problem. There was a book written many years ago by a psychiatrist, one of my favorite people, Thomas Saz, and he wrote a book called The Myth of Mental Illness, but he wrote another book. But he wrote another very small book that people don't know about, and it's called Ceremonial Chemistry, The Ritual of Drug Taking in America. Every addiction has a ritual attached to it. So there are places that are triggers. There are experiences that are triggers. So if you take a cocaine addict and you put them in one room of a house and another room away from them that they can hear, and you tap a razor blade on the end of a mirror, which is how they were doing lines of coke, just that sound will trigger that addiction. So if you think about the fact that you may have places where you eat or where you've cheated or where you've done this, and it's amazing because those environments will trigger the very craving for the things you're trying to avoid. That's what makes addiction in human beings so complicated, because we call that linkage. You get up in the morning, you have a cup of coffee. You get up in the morning, you have a cup of coffee. You get up in the morning, you have a cup of coffee and a cigarette. Within a few days, the smell of coffee will trigger all the craving for cigarettes. We call that linkage. So that happens all the time in our behavior. And so you've got to look at where those spaces and triggers are sometimes, and you need to kind of break the connection or create something different in that environment, or sometimes just step away from that environment for a period of time.
Right.
That's why coming to a center like some of the doctors have can be useful, because you get away from setting, and now you have a whole new setting that allows you an opportunity for these new choices to weave their way into your behavior. You got to look at the nervous system almost like a tapestry. And over time, all the choices we've made created kind of pathways and lines and patterns in that tapestry. So now all of a sudden you want to do something different. Well, those new choices have to be given some opportunity to weave their way into your behavior, because your body's naturally going to try to follow the old familiar roads. So breaking the setting, changing the environment, giving new choices a chance, and all of a sudden, as you do it more and more, that new healthy food now becomes part of your behavioral repertoire. But you had to give it a chance to weave its way into the tapestry of your own nervous system. It's very, very important.
I love what the example you gave about the tapping sound, because we just taught a class over the weekend for the mastery program of ultimate weight loss, and I talked about the importance of cleaning up the environment, because so many people live in houses with children or spouses that refuse to eat this way, and it's so difficult for them. Just like you said, the sound, sometimes it's not sound, but it could be smell, like toast, for example.
Of course. Yeah, of course. Because that's how our brain links all those sights and sounds and smells. And absolutely, that's who we are as human beings. We got this big, incredible brain that puts all of that together. But that also makes the work a little bit more difficult, or you have to be a little bit more mindful, because you have that kind of brain. We all do. So you've got to understand how you can make it work for you. And so then as you'll get to a place where the smell of a mango across the room will do the same thing. Or the smell of something really healthy will do this, but you've got to give it a chance to get there.
Well, how do they convince or speak to their loved ones about the need for a clean environment for their recovery? Because a lot of times their spouses are just as addictive, whether they're overweight or not.
I love when people come with their spouses to my place so they can learn together, because sometimes what happens is when you come, as you know, you can get really fired up. And you go home, and the last thing people want to do is have you come into the home after you've been away at the retreat or the spa and start revolutionizing the household, because they're ready to commit you to the nearest institution. I mean, they think you're out of your mind. You went to the cult. I love that. I think you went to a cult because you come home now. So the bottom line is, all I can say is, what can you do when you go home, maybe to add a few items to the household menu? If you think about this, most households in America cycle through maybe about 6 or 8 dishes a month of different things, because it works. You got a family, people are busy, they're working. So if you come and leave a place like mine or your program, and you can go home and even do 2 or 3 dishes that you can bring into the household, whether it's with legumes or some soups or whatever, it starts the ball rolling, and it gives people an opportunity to try new things without them feeling like you're coming home to absolutely revolutionize the household. But from your standpoint, you may still have to be preparing your own food for you to stay on that track. And so what you can do is kind of hold your ground, incorporate a few new things into the household menu, and then lead people in slowly but surely. And I think if you make an incredible vegan or veggie lasagna, let's say, for example, and they taste it and it's good and they'll love it, so that they got to because just by name, they're going to already react. They're going to say, oh, you're making that vegan lasagna. They're going to disparage it. But sometimes the taste is where you're going to win them over. So you make something really tasty, really lovely, bring a couple of things into the household and go from there. And it's the way you do it without fighting. I've seen relationships separate because of that, fighting over food. And it's a ridiculous thing. But we have spouses and we have mates and people that are not doing exactly what we're doing sometimes. And it's difficult. It's not easy.
It isn't easy, definitely. So there's a few substances, and these are not things that exist in nature. Our ancestors didn't use them, that I find a lot of people have trouble with. And the argument is, well, they don't have any calories. They're not causing me necessarily to gain weight. And I'd like to know your take on them. One of them is Diet Coke or any of the diet sodas. One is chewing gum, and one is caffeine.
Well, when you look at diet sodas, which also have caffeine, so it's not like they don't have caffeine. Caffeine is an interesting substance because it creates this routine, this roller coaster of stimulation and depression. And it's very important for people to realize that, and this is a very simple thing, and we've only known it for 3 or 4 centuries, whatever goes up has to come down. Most of us are living lifestyles where we're not burning the candle out at both ends. We're cutting the candle in 3 or 4 places and burning it out at 6, 8, and 10 ends. We got so much to do with work, with kids, with family. So we don't quite feel ourselves, and we need that boost. So we get up in the morning, we have a cup of coffee, maybe you have something refined with sugar or whatever, and you get a little bit of a boost. The problem is whatever goes up has to come down with equal and opposite force. So the body's going to crash. So it's very important to realize that even in Diet Cokes, caffeine, coffee, you have to understand that you're feeding this roller coaster of stimulation and depression. And the worst of these are energy drinks, which are the worst because they have the largest amount of caffeine. So the bottom line is you got to know that all stimulants by their nature are reinforcing depression. And that depression is in the endocrine, the hormonal system. It's actually causing your thyroid and adrenal glands to be suppressed. The problem is the thyroid and adrenal glands play a major role in the metabolism of sugars and fats and weight. So if you exhaust those tissues, those organs with these stimulants, it's going to make it harder and harder to lose weight and very difficult to keep it off. And so while it looks like it's nothing, while it looks like it's a non-caloric, simple thing, what do I care? You're reinforcing underlying physiological depression, and that's problematic. And then gums and things will have artificial sweeteners, and they'll have other things, just like in diet sodas. You got high phosphorus content that can cause disturbances of mineral instability. So there's a number of things with those that really don't have a place, because while they look like they're not doing much, they're actually very subtly creating some very profound changes in chemical toxicity and this roller coaster of stimulation and depression, which can affect the weight pattern across time.
And isn't it really bad for the bladder? I always hear that from urologists, that caffeine, coffee, all that stuff, alcohol, really, really bad for bladder.
Yeah, because you're pushing that through. That's why with those things, you'll have increased urinary output. You're putting a lot more load on liver and kidney. And so my feeling is there's no place for it. And the bottom line is what that means, though, is that we've got to get to that place where we're regenerating our energy reserve so we don't need to depend on that roller coaster of stimulation and depression. And it's a culture that doesn't look at that. We're just too busy. We got to get it going. We got to get something done. We got to get it on. And the bottom line is when you get away from those chemicals and you start eating the way we're recommending, it's amazing how your energy levels go through the roof. You don't need stimulants. You don't need to get on that roller coaster of stimulation and depression.
Right. What about chewing gum, whether it's sweetened with sugar or artificially?
Same issue. We're not meant to chew all day. I mean, think about this. The bottom line is you got a TMJ and a set of muscles, the largest representation of your body on your brain is in your mouth and jaw. So if you look at the way your body actually looks to the brain, it's like this. It's a big head and a big mouth with a little torso, big hands, because that's where all the neurological tissue is. We're not meant to be chewing like cud all day. You're creating a lot of stimulation, a lot of muscular input into that. You're creating a lot of brain frenzy with all the chewing, and those gums have their own additives, preservatives, chemical abuses. They just really don't have a place. And I just love this society. It's a society of gum chewers constantly. It's just another one of those habits of nervousness and anxiety, and we just need to break it. It just has no place in the routine of things. And we want to give the jaw and all of that a chance to relax. Those are muscles that need to take it easy. That's why we're also not eating 24 hours a day. We're not chewing around the clock. I mean,
right.
We're eating and then we're giving things a break,
Right, and it's also very annoying to be around gum chewers.
Yeah, I mean, and that aside from that, I don't want to get into all that, but yes, that's too. I agree with that too. So.
It's one of the most annoying things. Sarah asks, can you talk about sleep deprivation?
Yeah, I can. It's actually a very big piece. We now know that one of the leading causes of weight gain is sleep deprivation, and it's kind of intriguing. In the United States, we spend over $400 billion on the adverse effects of what happens because of sleep deprivation. That means in disease, in accidents, in injuries, and all of those things. We know that adults need minimum 6 to 8 hours of sleep a night, children like 9 to 10. And when you have significantly less than 6, let's say 4 or 5, we know that there's a dramatic increase in the risk of things like diabetes and heart disease. But we also know that when you're sleep deprived, there are 5 things that happen that affect weight gain. Number 1, the body perceives sleep deficiency as a major stress, so it releases a hormone called cortisol. And cortisol, which is your fight or flight hormone, will increase abdominal weight gain. It'll increase inflammation in the body, and it will interfere with your satiety signals. They give you the signals to stop eating, and that's an issue. Sleep deprivation will also increase the problem of insulin resistance. Insulin is the hormone that helps drive sugar into the liver and muscle cells so the body can store energy. And when you're eating way too high fat foods, that clouds those cells. Insulin can't work as well. Sugar levels go up, and the body converts that into weight gain. So the bottom line is, when you are sleep deprived, it increases insulin resistance, which means sugar can't get into your cells. And when sugar rises in your blood, it's a very toxic agent. So the body protects you by converting it into fat and weight gain. Then there are 2 hormones. One is called ghrelin, which is this appetite, that's the hormone that stimulates your appetite. And the body releases that when you need to get food to eat. But if all you had was appetite stimulation, we would all overeat. So the body has to have a stop hormone. And that's something released by fat cells called leptin. Here's the problem. When you're sleep deprived, there's a dramatic increase in the hormone that stimulates appetite and a dramatic decrease in the hormone that gives you the signal to stop. In short, you don't stop. And because of insulin resistance, your cells are starved for sugar, so you start looking for all the refined foods. And so sleep deficiency will program weight gain, appetite stimulation, inability to stop eating, and eating more refined and processed foods because of insulin resistance. So sleep deficiency is an issue. And that's why, if you think about it, people that exercise more readily sleep better. So exercise has value. People that handle stress and do some stress management techniques will do better. So I urge people, there's a big bit of data on meditation and stress management and the impact on weight loss. And that's because you're really cutting down on that hormone cortisol, which is that hormone in your brain that gives you monkey mind. So at night when you lay down and you feel like the world's spinning in your head and you can't sleep, your body's in a fight or flight mode. So being more active, taking some time for some stress management, meditation, things of that nature can have a big impact on your weight loss program. That's very, very important.
Nice. Julie says that based on your answer with the chewing gum, she says when she runs, she's a runner, she has to chew gum because she gets cotton mouth. What can a runner do to keep their mouth wet?
I'm assuming she's talking about very long distance running. A lot of times the bottom line is just hydrating the system well helps that, and also a large use of the fruit that's available was really hydrating with fruit has a lot of help for that. So utilizing more fruit in the diet really is helpful. And if it really can't change it, then what I would do during that time is I would get the least offensive kind of gum that she can do if she has to have it. Find something that's just fruit sweetened. Find something that's just really more of a natural thing just to keep the juices flowing. And that's what I would do. But I would try the fruit, the hydration, all of that before that. Thank you.
So, we talked about coffee, but what about alcohol? I find that people that drink coffee in the morning often seem to need alcohol at night, like the Judy Garland.
You have to understand something. This is a very important piece. First of all, there is no place for alcohol in the diet. And I hate, for people that want to drink, there was a time, everybody out there can remember, there was a time when they were telling you that 1 to 2 glasses of wine a day was healthy. Well, the more recent data that has come out has absolutely shown that there is no healthy level of alcohol. Even 1 to 2 glasses a day can significantly increase the risk of breast cancer in women, for example. And the bottom line is alcohol by far, to me, is the most dangerous addiction that exists. It's the only real addiction that you can die in detox. You can come off of heroin, you can come off of, but if you can have convulsions and seizures and alcohol withdrawal, that can kill you. It's really the only drug that does that. Now, obviously, we're not talking about people drinking to that extent, but understand that there are 2 phases of sleep, a lighter REM phase and then what we call a deep delta wave phase of sleep. When you drink alcohol, especially in the evening, it makes you feel like it's helping you go to sleep. It may make you feel like it's knocking you out if you're really anxious. The problem is it interrupts the deep delta wave phase of sleep so that you will wake up more tired and you will still have problems with reactive weight gain because you're not getting that deep phase that's incredibly important for regulating weight and body fat. So to me, the better time to drink alcohol, if you were going to drink it, is probably around midday. But the only people that drink midday are typically alcoholics. So most people like to drink at night. There is no place for alcohol really in the diet, in my opinion. Of course, this is my opinion. And when you're drinking alcohol because of the fluid retention, because of the interruption of sleep, because of the empty calories, it's one of those things that makes weight loss very, very difficult to achieve, even modest amounts of alcohol. And anybody that drinks alcohol knows this. You want to put on weight, just drink alcohol. It's very simple.
Oh my God. I just interviewed Dr. Chilaveresh from True North last week, and she said the same thing about both coffee and alcohol.
Yeah, they got to go. And I understand it's not, because many times we socialize around alcohol, as you know. And so you've got to find a different way to socialize and really get the alcohol content out of the system, especially if your goal is to really try to regulate weight. If you're in a position where you're trying to lose some weight or get healthy, you've got to put the alcohol down for a period of time, for sure. Get away from it.
Absolutely. What do you think the main challenges people face when they're trying to lose weight?
I think many of the things we've talked about. I think there's issues with peer and family pressures. I think the glut of foods that they've been exposed to that have created such profound levels of addiction. I think some not adopting some of the lifestyle changes that we're talking about, not being active enough, not taking time to handle stress more effectively. So the things that bring us out of balance will tend to be things that drive us to seek comfort and balance in behaviors like food use. And so you've got to look at that. The ways that we've been inundated with these foods that have created addiction and craving. And that's why we talk about putting the salt, oil, and sugar down for a period of time, getting away from that. So I would say they're cultural things and how we socialize and peer pressures in our families and friends, the time that the ways that we're trying to create comfort and balance in our own lives, the ways that we move, the ways that we handle stress, the ways that we create healthy relationship with ourselves. I mean, we're brought up, many of us, if you think about it, what's one of the biggest addictions today? Probably cosmetic surgery. So you get this sense of a lack of self-worth. It's almost like they're giving you the signals that you're not good enough unless you do this or that. There's a lot of pressure, and some of those pressures are greater on women without any question. And so the bottom line is all of those things feed this process of having a difficult relationship. And then just the fact that we've been addicted to some of these foods over many years of our lives. And you've got to take that step back to break that connection. And so, that's going to take a little bit of work. It's going to take a little bit of mindfulness. It's going to take a little bit of self-love and self-worth to look at what it is you're trying to achieve. And I tell people, when you're trying to create a goal, I don't care if it's a business or a weight goal or a health goal, take a good look. What is it you're trying to achieve? And what are the factors that are going to lead to that outcome? If I wanted to create a business right now, I would have to sit down, write a pro forma. What am I selling? What am I marketing? How am I going to do that? What are the choices I need to make to increase sales? I go through all those steps. The fact of the matter is, every choice we make has a consequence. Are the consequences of the choices you're making consistent with the goal you're trying to achieve? So if it's a weight goal, how is your movement? How is your activity? What are you doing with food? Take a conscious look. Write it down. Write a little thing down of what it is you're trying to achieve. And what is it going to take to make that happen? And then take a look at the choices you're making and the consequences of those choices. And are those consequences consistent with that goal? If they are, I applaud you. God bless you. If they're not, then it's time for all of us to put the big boy pants on, because no one's going to do that for any of us. No one's going to do it. So it comes a point where we have to consciously take a look at our lives and say, is this bringing me closer to what I'm saying I want to achieve? Because if you tell me you want to be thinner and leaner and healthier and fitter, and all the choices of your day are taking you away from that goal, comes a point where you have to reevaluate the consequences of what you're choosing to do. And we can all do that with more consciousness. And that's why with lifestyle choice and change, it's really about evolution. It's not good and bad. It's not religious. I did that bad thing or I did that good thing. It's about, are my choices consistent and congruent with the goals that I'm trying to achieve? And if they're not, how can I get help or insight or support to find out what I can do better to give myself the chance to achieve that goal? And I think if you do it that way, it becomes very hopeful and it becomes very positive, and you emancipate yourself from the slavery of these fast food diets and fast restricted programs and all these things that may give you the opportunity to lose a few pounds in the moment, but you wind up mortgaging your health future in the process. We want to not only create healthy weight, we want to create health in general. So it's about how can we be a healthy, integrated person while creating the body image and the health outcome we would like to achieve. And we can all do that better, but there are forces that pull you away from that. And the only way to address them is consciously look at them and then make the decisions in your life about how you want to change what you're doing.
Yeah. I just want to, Dr. Frank, read a few comments from the live viewers.
Yeah.
Chris says, this is the clearest, most supportive talk I have heard for a long time. Nancy says, me too, Chris, this is awesome. Christelle says, I'm so glad I clicked on this interview. New fan of Frank Sabatino. He's awesome. Deborah says, amazing interview. Jean says, he's awesome. Barbara says, this is very helpful. So if you guys like Frank, like I like Frank, and you want to spend, at 6 weeks with him, he has created an amazing new course that I'm going to give a link for very soon to register, that is called Lean for Life, the Science of Effective Weight Loss. Can you tell us a little bit about why you created it and what it will be like? It's 11 modules, and it's amazing.
I created it because of some of the things we've addressed tonight. Too often in the weight loss story, the focus is only on calories in or calories out with activity. And we're not looking at the whole human being that's involved with this issue of regulating weight and health. And so we want to address the idea of, yes, food. It's all about the food. What is that food program that's really in our best interest? But then what part of the program is involved with? How can we improve activity to help that process? How do we look at what we can do about sleep? How about these factors of addiction? I even have a whole section on environmental toxicity, because we now know that the chemicals that are being used as sprays in food and things that are being marketed are what we now call obesogens. They're chemicals that foster the outcome of obesity. So I've created this very complete holistic picture, this kind of story that incorporates all of that. What's the hormonal base, the activity component, addiction component, stress, sleep, environmental, addiction, because we need to look at it from the standpoint of what makes us human beings. And all of those pieces are part of who we are. And I find in all the years of counseling people that when I share that information, people have a set of tools that make it almost impossible for them not to be successful. It gives them the tools to take that closer look at their own lives and do things in a very hopeful way that give them tremendous results and success. So I'm driven by that, really, in watching people with weight issues almost 40 years and helping thousands of people achieve healthy weight and body images by incorporating all the pieces that are in these modules. And I tried to present that in a very straightforward way, and I think I have. And not only are we going to have those modules, but as part of those modules, as you know, we're going to have Q&A on every one of those modules, which will be modules in themselves. So people are going to have all that feedback, the ability to ask questions, the ability to really fine-tune what they can do at home to create a really hopeful outcome of health and body image.
Right. And for less than $100, they get 11 modules, basically. And we deliver the lectures as one, and then each module has a Q&A with Dr. Frank based on that module, plus a bonus one at the end where we're going to wrap it all up. And it starts next Tuesday. So I hope you'll click on the link and check it out and consider registering, because this is phenomenal material that many of you have not heard, at least not delivered this way and this in-depth. So thank you so much. With just many comments. Janice says, love him. Bruni says, great talk. Sherry, he is so clear and concise. And we'll end with the comment from Jean. He also has beautiful eyes.
Well, I want to thank everybody that viewed into this. Really, it's been my pleasure to be here. I love interacting and hanging out with AJ and sharing this information with you all. And I hope I see you through those modules, because I think it'll really change your life. I really do.
Absolutely. And I just got a text from Janine saying he's so amazing, and he is. And I look forward to being in the class with you as the moderator. And thank you so much for your time, Dr. Frank. And thank all of you for watching another episode of Healthy Living Live. I'm Chef AJ, and I make healthy taste delicious.
Thank you.
I don't know what that means. Okay. Take care, everybody. Bye.